Director of Binus Global. So Ibu Dia earned her bachelor degree in mathematics and computer science from University of Adelaide, Australia. And she also completed her Master of Education in Australia in the Flinders University. And she is also a Fulbright scholar. She completed her PhD at the Graduate School of Education in the University of Berkeley, USA. Wow, yeah. So please welcome our honorable moderator, Ibu Dia, who will be moderating the whole session. Ibu Dia, please. Okay, so start from now. Ibu Dia will be leading the session. So Ibu Dia, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I think I have to sit down now. Alright, so good afternoon everyone. Alright, so today we have two distinguished guests or speakers. So one is from Australia, Miss Alison Duncan, and another one is from Madrid. So she came all the way from Madrid, Spain to deliver, the presentation today. So without further ado, I think I would like to invite the two honorary speakers to actually come to the stage with me. Okay, again, on behalf of Binus University, we would like to express our gratitude. We would like to thank you for, for giving the time and to actually come to our university. To participate in this our regular activities of Binus Festival, and of course the objective of these activities is actually to broaden our students' mind, because having a vision of world-class university, of course we would like to equip our students with a global mindset. And then also the topics that we have chosen really agrees with our vision of fostering and empowering the society in building and serving the nation. So that's our university. So I think at first we will have Professor Dr. Maria Eizaguirre. That's excellent. All right. So I'm going to pronounce the French name here. All right. So I would like to read a little bit of her biography. So after obtaining her Doctor of Philosophy at the University of Oxford in 1999 as a Rhodes Scholar, Maria started her career in craft foods in consumer insights and innovations. After 12 years, Maria moved into the education industry as marketing director for the IE University. She subsequently became the director of insights and strategy for IE Corporate, leading efforts around repositioning programs and program portfolios. So after 6 years at IE, she took up an executive position as VP Marketing and Sales at the Laureate International Universities, leading marketing, sales, and business development. And then, of course, her passion in teaching called her back, and Maria currently teaches both undergraduate and postgraduate students at IE University, combining it with her role as the academic lead for marketing fundamentals for the BBA program, Bachelor of Business Administration, yes, and the academic director for the Master in Corporate and Marketing Communication. Maria leads the IE Center for Consumer Driven Growth. So I would also like to, I think I would read your CV. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So then to feeling more. Okay. All right. So without further ado, I think I would like to invite Professor Maria to start. Yes, you can hear, or can I? Yes, you can do. You can do anything.
Just come now.
I know, that's right. Yes, exactly.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go down there. Yeah? Good one. Much better. Right. So, I'm going to be talking today about something that maybe for some of you might be a bit irrelevant or not, because I think all of us are people and we are engaging with brands in different ways. How many of you are business majors or business administration or communications or branding generally? None? None? Oh goodness! Well, I'm hoping you'll find this interesting anyway if you want to work for, how many of you want to work for a company? Most of them. Good. Right, so what is customer centricity? Now, there's a lot of emphasis at the moment about this age of the customer. More than ever, you're going to find this thing happening. You have individuals, you specifically, that for once, right now, and contrary to other generations, you have much more power and information than ever before. So there is a strong shift by companies and their brands to focus on you and understand you in order to be able to push forward and grow their businesses. Okay. The reality is that since you have all those phones that you have, and you are always feeding back on everything that you're doing, you are very savvy. Generally, and the rest of us are becoming very savvy as well. So big companies are deciding to take on this challenge, and it's impacting the way that we're running companies at the moment, the way that we're measuring results, right, and the way that we're putting forward new products and new services for you to enjoy. So many companies right now are actually very proud of being what we call customer-centric. Okay, and we'll see in a moment what this means. Because it's not an easy term to define. But you have people like Amazon, and I know you don't have Amazon in Indonesia just yet, but trust me, when it comes, you will love Amazon like the rest of the world. Amazon was born with this obsession to be customer-centric, so you could get whatever you wanted, wherever you were in the world, at the cheapest possible price, at the shortest possible moment, right? And they build the business to do exactly that. Zappos, they create shoes. They no longer talk about themselves as a shoe company, but as a customer service company, a customer support company, right? And then you have other players, and this is just one of them, which is an airline, which actually recruits for values, and they never recruit functions. They recruit people with warrior hearts, right? Because they believe that these people are the best people to push forward their companies, right? So there is this interest of putting people at the heart of business constantly, right? Now, academically, and this is my job, and a bit boring for you right now, but there is a lot written on this, right? Some better, some worse, but a lot of academics and many scholars are recognizing this role that we have as people to determine the future of a business, right? And the future of a company, the future of a corporation. And then you have big consultants, and the Big Four, Deloitte is one of them, they're actually measuring this and proving without any doubt that when you put people at the heart of business, you not only grow your revenues, your money much faster, you actually grow your, and very sustainable through time, you're actually very able to grow your profits as well. Up to 60%, become up to 60% more profitable generally. Any finance majors? Not either? My goodness, what are you reading? Right. Anyway, at the end of the day, what happens is that companies, given all this weight of evidence, all companies are at some point thinking, we are customer-centric, right? But the reality is that when they actually want to become customer-centric, when they want to be there, out there, doing things for you as people, they find some certainly bad challenges. And this is Dilbert, right? And some words of wisdom from him, he's always quite good. And he says, it's always our deepest desire to satisfy our customers and understand them, right? But the reality is that sometimes it's very hard to actually know what to do, or we're very busy, right? Don't bother me with this, or I don't understand it, how can I make it tangible, or even unprofitable. So my business is going to lose money because I have to do what you want, forget it, right? So at the end of the day,
it's not so easy to be customer-centric. So what I'm going to share with you, bear with me, I'll do it as pedagogically as possible. There's some insights that we're finding about doing this, about putting people at the heart of corporations and at the heart of businesses, right? Now, the first one is that it's not easy to do this because we are not quite sure what it means, right? We have this very nebulous, like this big idea in the middle of the study, so it almost feels like a little bit Star Wars, right? That you put consumers at the heart of everything we do, and that is so vague that we don't actually know how to do it in businesses. We're really quite lost, right? Now, back in 1953, some Nobel Prize winner already said this, right? But he said, when you put people at the heart of everything you do, the only thing that you're actually doing is recognizing that everything you put out there is being bought by someone. Right? And that's not good enough, because that's just a transaction. It's recognizing that someone is paying for your services, which doesn't give you very much of a status as an individual or as a person, or your dreams, right? Because you're just paying. Your generation is not about that, and we know this very well, right? So in the 1990s, we moved a little bit further, and we created and we built this idea of marketing. If any of you are interested in marketing and branding, in which what you say is, okay, we need to create value for people. So we acknowledge that they exist, and what we do is we give them value to capture value back from them. So we actually establish a relationship with them, right? And you can tell me what you want, and I can create something for you. Now that is no longer that important, it's that relevant per se. It has to exist, but we need to give a step forward. And what's happening right now when you talk about customer centricity, really putting people at the heart of business, what you're doing is you're organizing businesses so that you are reducing functional silos, so that everybody in a corporation is looking at you as a person and feeding back to their own functions, irrespective of where they're coming in and working for that business to grow. Okay? So it's a very different issue. It's more about community building and about holistically understanding a business and moving that forward. Right? Now, I don't think you can see anything in my slides, so I'm going to read them. But basically what happens is that customer centricity at the end is defined more what it is by what it is not than what it is. So yes, it's putting people at the heart of everything that you do. Yes, it's recognizing that they exist, establishing a relationship, and establishing a business that is centered around them and works only with them in mind. But by definition, what you have to do then is stop selling products and start selling experiences, which is exactly what you are living right now. Right? You're not interested so much in the features and the benefits, you're interested in how you're being made feel by all the different actions that you take every single day when you buy something. Right? And that has deep implications for a company because it becomes very strategic for a company and very proactive to be able to meet these demands as they, before they even appear in the market, to stay ahead of the game, very much in an Apple way. Right? And so then when it comes to measuring, in a corporation, when it comes to measuring, you have to invent new ways of measuring, because old ways no longer exist, right? So it's always focusing on this outside-in perspective, that there's someone that's actually determining the direction your business is going to be taking, right? And it's very important. Now, sometimes it's very difficult to, very easy to confuse and very difficult to distinguish between customer experience and customer centricity, right? Do you at least wonder what customer experience is? Yeah? Customer experience is this thing that you have right here in front of you, right? Because you are always going to be forgetting what you said, what people are saying. You will forget what they did, but you'll never forget how people make you feel, right? And this is very much what customer experience is. You're having a customer experience. I'm having a customer experience moment at the moment. I'm a representative of a university. I'm a professor. I want to give you my best. I bring good content. I'm trying to deliver in an engaging way, and I love my company, and I want all of you to benefit from it. And by the sounds of it, you will be, because we have just signed an agreement. So I'm hopefully going to be your teacher at some point, hopefully, right? So this is me. But the reality is that I have 200 students in front of me right now. So I have 200 experiences in front of me right now. Because experiences are personal, they're emotional, and they belong to you. Some of you might be thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here. Some of you might be thinking, I'm actually quite entertained. Some of you might be thinking, I'm actually learning something, or I'm curious, or I didn't think that business could be interesting, right? And some of you might be thinking, my goodness, it's only 20 minutes more before she stops talking, right? So this is what happens in real life. Customer centricity belongs to a company, customer experience belongs to a person. So when you translate this into business, you have to be very certain of what is what. My objective as a corporation is going to be always to make sure that you have the best customer experience. And I'm going to try and control it as much as possible. But that belongs to you. What I need to do is make sure that my customer-centric strategy is in place. And it touches every single point that is important for me to ensure that you have the best possible customer experience. Okay? And as a result, I might get the money, right? And normally what happens is that most businesses just want to make the money. They do so by thinking that the customer-centric, and the outcome is that it might have or not a good customer experience. So it goes the other way around, right? It looks a little bit like this, well, it looks like a little bit like that if you can see anything. But basically what's happening here is that what you actually engage with when you are, okay, quick question. Any brand that you love, you can't live without? Something that you buy, the Starbucks down the stairs, so. No? Right, you might hate, this is working anyway, right? If you hate the Starbucks down there, you hate it because it's not giving you the right experience that you're searching. It's not fulfilling one of these, or just one of these. It's either not walking the talk, not doing what it promises. So they might be saying that it has a really cool coffee and you find it absolutely disgusting, right? Or they're not personalizing enough. The fact that you can give your name is no interest to you. Come on, do a little bit more, right? Or they're not acting with integrity. So are you really saving the planet? Are you doing something that is environmentally important for me or socially important for me, right? Can I trust you? Can I trust you? And this is important for you guys, right? Or are you solving my problems? If you give me a cinnamon roll that I just hate, can I give it back to you and you give me one that I like, or may I even change my order, right? Or empathy. Do you even listen to me when I say something? And if you listen to me, do you spend time and effort trying to do things for me, right? Maybe you can tell them what you want downstairs and they can bring it to you so that you feel that your customer experience with Starbucks is enhanced, right? But in order for that to happen, you have to have all this in place, right? And we'll go through just not all of them, but just some of them, right? The first thing that you have to have in place is to reorganize your business so that everybody has a bit of responsibility in making your experience a little bit better, right? So it's not just learning how you feel. I hate you, Starbucks, right? Or defining your target audience, definitely not Binus university students, right? Or even incorporate my feedback. That's the basic. You're not doing this well enough, right? But you also have to align your technologies and your process to make this happen and map your customer journey so that you can understand how people are entering and leaving and staying, etc. And then you have to do some very important things. You have to make sure that your boss and your boss's boss and the super owner and CEO of the company actually believes that you are important, right? You have to have a culture that enhances that, and then you have to have processes that measure that satisfaction. Okay? So very briefly, and then I'll start finishing. Very important that your boss's boss believes in this, or the owner believes in this. It is fundamental. If they don't do that, you have no hope in hell that this is going to happen. Right? Now look at this man, and I know you don't know Amazon very well, but Jeff Bezos takes this to the extreme. He's so obsessed with making your customer experience as good as possible that he has two very good tools in line in order to be able to help you. The first one, in his own C-suite, his direct people, they always sit down in chairs, and there's always one chair empty. That chair represents you, because they don't want to make any decision without having you in mind. This is very important, okay? Now this permeates down the organization at every possible level. So if you have any random meeting, you're going to have one empty chair, and that empty chair is not going to be empty really, there's going to be the person there. figuratively, metaphorically, so that you make decisions with them in mind. Okay? And the other thing that he does that's very interesting is this question mark. So when Amazon eventually comes to Indonesia, you are going to be able to write to him if you're not happy. And you will be able to put Jeff at Amazon.com, I hated the way my package was broken when it got me, and that impacted the product, I want my money back. Now, he takes 2.5 hours, 3 hours every morning reading everybody's feedback. Imagine, this for a CEO, 2.5 to 3 hours every morning. And when he sees something that worries him, when he really worries that something might impact how the business is working, he forwards that email to the relevant person in charge of that department with that horrible thing, the question mark, which is the most stressful moment for anybody's morning, to actually receive something from your boss with a question mark that you have to act immediately, right? That is the beginning of good customer centricity that is going to ensure that you have a good customer experience with Amazon, right? Now, it comes at a cost, because what happens, and I'm not going to focus on these two, but what happens is that it took Amazon so long to make money. It took them 14 years, 1-4, to make money. 14 years. They made, in 14 years, the same amount of money that they made in Q1 2018 alone. Now, Amazon has been publicly traded since 1997. Were you alive in 1997? You were born in 2001, 2000, right. So you weren't even alive, and this guy was already writing letters to his investors saying, I'm sorry, but I am not compromising my vision of being a customer-centric company. I am not compromising my vision. And you can read it in Google if you search for it. Right? This is how important it was for him. But he was making the revenues, he was selling, but he wasn't making the profits for 14 years, right? So this is something that you have to bear in mind, that sometimes long-term decisions don't work in the short term, but they do work in the long term, right? It's the only brand that is growing 56%, the only brand in the world, right? Faster than any other brand. Well, 5 times as faster as any other brand. Just imagine, right? And it's also going to happen, not just if you believe the boss of the boss believes it, but if you have a culture that prizes certain behaviors, risk-taking behaviors, acceptance of failure, openness to thinking laterally, etc., etc. And not every company is ready to do that. These companies are very focused on making money. So the idea that they might not make money and that there is a risk involved in every decision that they're making terrifies them, right? So you have to have company cultures that allow for that to happen, right? Now, this is a very interesting example. Do you know Patagonia? It's an outdoor apparel. Do any of you practice outdoor sports? Do you surf or ski? Probably not. But do you hike or climb? No? Oh my goodness, what do you do? So, this guy is a surfer, right? And he had this idea that the world was better with surfers. So he created a company for surfers in which he gives exactly the same weight to the employee that works for them than to the end customer that buys their stuff. There is very little difference between the two. He is convinced, like it says here, that if he has a good employee experience, he's going to have good behavior that is going to translate in better customer experience for the customers. To start with, he never, ever, ever recruits if you're not a sports silent sport practicer. So he won't get you if you don't climb or hike or ski or surf, right? Now, this is amazing because I don't think you can read very well what's next to it. But what happens is that when he built his culture, he built a culture for surfers, right? The number one thing, you want to catch a wave instead of being stuck in a 2-hour meeting, you can go and do that, right? You can carry on your lifestyle, and you can decide how you're going to be working for us. You have an alternative work schedule, and you can work around that one. And because I prize that you are taking care of nature, because you believe in giving back to nature what you take from her, then I'm going to pay you for any alternative transport that you're engaged in. So I'm pricing your behavior, right? And this will turn around into proper customer behavior at the end. Now, it won't happen also if you have a very hierarchical and very siloed and function organization. And there are some organizations like this one that is rapidly going away from a hierarchy into teams around projects, so that you are not a manager of a manager of a manager. Amazon already has a maximum number of people in a team of 5, but you're actually working as a person and you're changing roles depending on the project, right? And this is called holacracy. If you're ever interested in working not as a manager, but to learn about who you are and what your potential is, irrespectively of how far you can get ahead. Okay? Now, this is not going to work very well unless we can measure it properly. So we are moving away from very traditional ways of measuring to more holistic ways of measuring. Customer satisfaction scores. You can even invent customer happiness scores. So each company is deciding which is the best measure that they can put in order to be able to really, really understand whether the customer is actually happy and the experience is seamless at every touch point that we've seen before, right? With the Starbucks example. Now, innovation, very important. This is another example from Patagonia. Very big companies that are excelling at this, at the end of the day, have very, very good co-creation and innovation. And they're bringing customers in to tell them how to bring new products into the market. This is a classic example from the surfers from Patagonia, in which, because they want to give back to Earth what they deplete them for, actually surfers were very worried that they were using the least sustainable piece of clothing ever, which is a wetsuit, right, made of neoprene, which is going to probably be standing in the moon in 500 years' time, right? So they didn't want that, so they created a wetsuit made with algae, right? So that as you are surfing, you are degrading naturally the neoprene, the wetsuit that you're wearing. Right? So very interesting concept. Now, if I have to summarize this, I'll summarize it like this. When you're out there making a purchase, right, remember this. And if you ever work in a company and you want to sell the products, or if you're ever in the world of startup and you have a good idea that you want to put forward, think this very carefully. It's never going to be about selling. It's not sell, 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 right? You are going to be chosen, 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 chosen. So do and have a business that allows you to be chosen, right? Forget that you're selling. Yeah. Now this is me. You can contact me or read me if you need me. I hope it hasn't been too long. Perfect. So just this, right? You can look at me there, and I would like to finish with this nice idea that you're not here to sell, not even big businesses. Nice. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for the insight, Professor Maria. And now I would like to introduce our second speaker. So our second speaker is Ms. Alison Duncan. She's the Minister-Counsellor in Economics, Investment and Infrastructure from the Australian Embassy. So we can actually say that you're probably the attaché of, yeah, something like that, right? So, Ms. Alison Duncan just recently arrived back in Indonesia. So she is holding the position since December 2018. So before that, she was the Assistant Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra, and she also became the Counsellor in Economics and Trade, then the Deputy High Commissioner for the Australian High Commission in Wellington, New Zealand. She was also the Director of Pacific Strategy Section in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra, Australia. And for her education, she graduated with Bachelor of Laws and Bachelor of Arts from the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia. And she also took Executive Masters in Public Administration from the Australia-New Zealand School of Government. And she was awarded as the Outstanding Achievement Award from the Australia-New Zealand School of Government in 2014. And she was also awarded as the Young Public Sector Leader from the Institute of Public Administration of Australia in 2015. So without further ado, Alison, the floor is yours.
Siang. Sudah tahu saya Alison dan saya dari Kedubes Australia. Nah, saya sudah diberitahu bahwa presentasi ini harus dalam bahasa Inggris ya. Jadi kalian beruntung karena tidak harus mendengarkan bahasa Indonesia saya yang jelek. So firstly, I'd like to thank you, Dia and Binus, for the invitation to speak to you today. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion at the end too. My presentation is going to be quite different to Maria's, hopefully not too much more boring. I mean, yours was really good. I mean, I know mine will seem boring in comparison to her, was what I meant. Diplomat, yeah. So the area that I lead at the Australian Embassy is responsible for a large portion of Australia's development assistance to Indonesia, and that includes working with your government on important economic governance and infrastructure issues. And my team also works on trade and economic issues, including the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which is also known as IASEPA. So I've been asked today to talk about good health and economic growth, and I think that fits quite nicely with the work that I do at the High Commission at the Embassy. So what I want to focus on is human capital and how maximising the potential of people can help achieve economic growth. I'll focus on two aspects of human capital: health and education. I'll also describe a bit how the Embassy works with your government in these areas and how all of that is relevant to our Economic Partnership Agreement. So human capital is particularly relevant to Indonesia right now because of what economists refer to as the demographic dividend. That's the proportion of the population that is working age relative to the total population. Indonesia currently has a window of opportunity to take advantage of its demographic dividend by pursuing policies now that will benefit you well into the future when its demographics shift towards an older population. So right now you've got a lot of people of working age and you don't have that many people who need to be supported by those in the workforce. To make the most of potential workforce, governments need to ensure that everybody in society has opportunity to participate in the workforce and contribute to the economy. Oh, I forgot about my slides. Sorry about that. So, a healthy society is a productive society. According to the UN Development Programme, Indonesia ranks 116th out of 185 countries on the Human Development Index. Non-communicable diseases like strokes, heart disease and diabetes are the main cause of death and ill health in Indonesia. Tuberculosis is the fourth leading cause of health loss for Indonesians, and there are still outbreaks of vaccine preventable diseases like measles and diphtheria, and animal-borne diseases like anthrax, leptospirosis and rabies. And more than 30% of Indonesia's children under 5 are stunted. The good news is that it's possible to avoid all of these conditions. which means that Indonesia has a lot of potential to improve its health profile, which in turn can lead to better economic growth. I'd like to talk about a few areas in the health sector where good policy and early intervention can lead to huge improvements in the nation's health. Oh, what did I do? Oh, there we go. Stunting is the result of malnutrition, and it's been shown to reduce people's cognitive ability. People with reduced cognitive ability have difficulty concentrating, and that results in poor education outcomes. Children with poor education outcomes are disadvantaged as adults. Stunting causes economic losses for Indonesia of around 203% of GDP every year. Itu 203% PDB setiap tahun. As Indonesia's economy grows, it needs more and better educated workers. But stunting limits people's potential, and it can compound existing inequality. Improving nutrition in the first 1,000 days of life can make a difference, with early childhood interventions widely recognised as amongst the most cost-effective investments a country can make in promoting growth and reducing inequality. The Australian Embassy is working with your government, Save the Children and Nutrition International to address the problem of stunting. But in a country with a population of over 260 million people, it's hard to address problems everywhere all at once. So the aim of this program is to improve nutrition for adolescent girls, women of reproductive age, and children under the age of 2 across NTT and Jawa Barat, which are two of the provinces in Indonesia with the highest rates of stunting. Over 5 years, the program should help 3.3 million people, save almost 15,000 lives, and prevent around 4,500 cases of stunting. And if it's successful, this program will provide lessons for other parts of Indonesia. Inadequate water and sanitation is another significant source of illness, which in turn reduces human capital and economic growth. In Indonesia, around 80 million people, 80 juta, don't have access to clean water, and around 55 million people, 55 juta, don't have access to sanitation facilities. The lack of clean water reduces the level of hygiene in the community, and it increases the risk of skin diseases and other waterborne diseases. Unsafe drinking water is a major cause of diarrhoea, which accounts for 31% of deaths among babies under 1 year of age. Every year, at least 30% of Indonesians suffer from waterborne diseases, including cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. Australia is working with the Indonesian national and provincial level governments across a number of projects to improve access to water and sanitation and improve hygiene. One of these programs, Hamzimas, works with local communities to plan, finance, manage and maintain their water supply and sanitation systems and improve hygiene behaviour. These efforts have enabled over 13 million people to access improved water facilities such as piped water, and more than 11 million people to access improved sanitation facilities such as flushing toilets. A new phase of this program will see the Indonesian government attempt to achieve universal access to water and sanitation in rural areas, covering 27,000 villages in 33 provinces. Another important aspect of human capital is women's health and their participation in the workforce. When people get sick, particularly children or old people, it tends to be women who stay at home to look after them. When people have bad health throughout their whole life, the burden on women, carers, increases, and it becomes really difficult for women to get jobs outside the home. So poor health in the community reduces female participation rates. The World Bank has done surveying to show that Indonesia's female labour participation rate is just above 50%. That means only half of working age women in Indonesia are in the workforce. By comparison, it's 73% in Vietnam and 60% in Thailand. What we know is that when there are fewer women in the workforce, families earn less money and the overall economy is less efficient. Fewer people working means a greater burden on a smaller number of wage earners and lower economic growth for the country overall. Lower economic growth means it takes longer to lift people out of poverty and improve the average standard of living. So if Indonesia is to avoid what's known as the middle income trap, it needs to improve women's health and workforce participation. Australia is working with Indonesian civil society organisations, LSM, to help advance gender equality and women's empowerment. We focus on issues like social protection, employment and workforce discrimination, overseas labour migration, reproductive health and nutrition, and violence against women. All of these areas affect women's health and their ability to participate fully in the economy. Now, can anyone tell me where many wealthy Indonesians go for treatment when they get sick? That's right, they go to Singapore. Why? They go there because of the standard of health care that's available in countries like Singapore, don't they? That doesn't mean Indonesia doesn't have good doctors. Indonesia has very good doctors, but the problem is there aren't enough of them. They lack a peer network, and they often don't have access to proper equipment, and they have too many patients. So all of these rich Indonesians, they go to Singapore and other countries to get their medical treatment. What does that mean for Indonesia? Firstly, it means that there's an awful lot of valuable economic activity being lost to other countries. This isn't just about the salaries of doctors. It's about the nurses, the hospital cleaners, the catering staff, the hotels where family members stay when they're visiting their loved ones. It's all the ancillary goods and services that sit alongside looking after a sick person. A report published by Global Indonesian Voices in 2018 said that Indonesians spent 100 trillion rupiah per year, 100 triliun rupiah setiap tahun, for medical treatment overseas. That's about 8% of your GDP. In 2015, there were 600,000 patients from Indonesia seeking medical treatment overseas. Singapore alone earns more than 10 trillion rupiah from Indonesian patients every year. The lost opportunity of providing services to wealthy private patients also prevents greater investment in Indonesia's health sector. Investment which would raise the overall standard of health care for all Indonesians. What do you think would happen if the Indonesian government allowed the best healthcare operators in the world to invest and work in this country? Would it mean that local healthcare workers would suddenly lose their jobs? Who thinks that? No, of course it doesn't, because there's already a huge undersupply of qualified healthcare workers in Indonesia. And it's much more expensive for a foreign company to bring in foreign workers than it is to hire trained locals. Would it mean that more training, international best practice and state-of-the-art medical equipment is available to Indonesian health workers to improve patient outcomes? What do you think? Yeah? Would it mean that more high-paying jobs are created in Indonesia because wealthy Indonesians stay at home for their medical treatment instead of going to Singapore? Yeah? But would it also mean that those foreign companies take all their profits overseas? Well, they'd probably take some, yeah, but not until after they paid good wages to all their local employees, invested in healthcare infrastructure here in Indonesia, contributed to growing the allied health sector here, paid local contractors and service providers, paid taxes, and also delivered quality healthcare to lots of Indonesians. But yeah, they'd probably take some profit as well. And they'd return that to their shareholders, and some of those shareholders would probably be overseas. But don't forget, you're already losing 100 trillion rupiah per year just to foreign countries. And I think the outcome of that is the economic activity and social benefit of having foreign providers participate in the Indonesian market would absolutely be a net gain for Indonesia. I mentioned at the start of my talk the Economic Partnership Agreement that was recently signed by Indonesia and Australia. It's called the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. And that agreement takes some steps in this direction. Once it enters into force, the agreement will allow partial Australian ownership of large hospitals, and within large hospitals, partial ownership of pathology and paramedic services, as well as medical and dental specialist clinic services around Indonesia. Now, this is a pretty small step in the grand scheme of opening the health system to foreign contributions, but we hope that Australian health services firms will take up the opportunity and help to grow Indonesia's health sector for the benefit of Indonesians. So I've talked a lot about health. Let me turn now to the other important aspect of human capital, education. I talked before about Indonesia's so-called demographic dividend. The fact that you currently have more people of working age in this country than you do of non-working age. That's a huge advantage compared to many of the world's economies, including Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore. But a demographic dividend doesn't pay off unless the people of working age have the education and skills needed to contribute to the economy. What we've learnt from other countries who've gone through huge demographic shifts is that this window is crucial for governments to implement policies that support inclusive economic growth. In other words, Indonesia needs to avoid getting old before it gets rich. And you only have 30 more years to do it, because according to demographic trends, Indonesia's dependency ratio will go above 50% by 2050. That means there'll be more people of non-working age than there are people of working age. Evidence shows that countries that translate expenditure on education into strong learning outcomes experience higher rates of economic growth. And while Indonesia currently spends a large percentage of its annual government budget on education, does anyone know how much? It's 20%. That's huge. 20% of Indonesia's national budget every year is spent on education, but the education system isn't delivering the results needed to prepare young people for the jobs of the future. And I'm not just saying that as an Australian looking in. This is your president is saying this, your ministers are saying this. Currently, 55% of Indonesian school leavers are functionally illiterate. That means that their reading and writing isn't good enough to manage daily living and employment tasks that require reading skills beyond a basic level. A survey of Indonesian CEOs found that 75% of Indonesian workers aren't qualified for the jobs that they do. This is one of the reasons that Indonesia's productivity levels are the lowest in Asia. So more needs to be done to improve the quality and relevance of teaching, both in schools and in vocational and technical education and training. Investing in better quality education is one of the best investments Indonesia can make for its future. Australia is working with Indonesia to understand how student learning outcomes in literacy and numeracy can be improved in primary schools across Indonesia. This program's working on local solutions to find out what does and doesn't work. For example, in locations where students and teachers use local languages at home, the program is trialling early years teaching in those Eizaguirre to improve learning outcomes. Australia also has a large scholarships program for Indonesia called the Australia Awards. I've gone ahead too quick. There's more than 9,000 Indonesians have studied at Australian universities on scholarship programs, with many going on to take leadership positions and make a significant difference to Indonesia's development. A large number of Indonesians, around 20,000 a year, also pay their own way to study in Australia. But not everyone can afford to study abroad, and not everyone can get a scholarship. So again, the key to rapidly improving Indonesia's higher education and work training sectors is providing access to foreign providers who can help increase the skills of Indonesia's workforce in order to help this country get rich before it gets old. And here is another very important outcome of our economic partnership agreement. It allows partial Australian ownership of certain technical and vocational training service providers in Indonesia. Australia has some of the best technical and vocational training providers in the world. In negotiating this access to Australian providers, the Indonesian government's intention was to attract Australian private investment to establish training campuses in Indonesia to deliver high-quality technical training and certification directly within Indonesia. That means giving Indonesian students the opportunity to obtain recognised international qualifications without having to leave home. Australia and Indonesia have also agreed to a reciprocal skills exchange, which will allow professionals from both countries to gain 6 months' experience in the other's market. Australia is also committed to allow up to 200 Indonesians per year to engage in 6-month work training opportunities in Australia, and we're going to increase the number of Australian work and holiday visas for Indonesians, and that provides useful work experience to young Indonesians as well as assisting Australia to meet our own labour requirements. So a healthy and educated workforce will provide Indonesia with a massive economic advantage. So how does Indonesia use that advantage to improve the lives of its people? The answer is by participating in the global economy. For any of you who study economics, are there any of you? No? Semua sastra, ya? You know that economics, okay, you don't know, but economics is all about comparative advantage. Some of Indonesia's many advantages are its natural resources, its objek wisata, and its huge workforce. But there are also areas where other countries have a greater comparative advantage than Indonesia. To grow the economy and improve the livelihoods of the people, Indonesia needs to participate in global value chains. This requires an openness to importing from other countries and exporting those things that Indonesia specialises in. Here's an example. Australia's climate makes us very good at growing wheat, gandum, something that doesn't grow very well in Indonesia. So Australia exports a lot of wheat to Indonesia every year. That wheat gets processed in flour mills in Indonesia, which are owned and run by Indonesian people and employs Indonesian workers. The flour then gets sent to factories in Indonesia, which are owned and run by Indonesians who employ lots of Indonesian workers, where it gets turned into mie instan. And those mie instan are then exported back to Australia and lots of other countries in the world to feed all those hungry university students. But if, for example, Indonesia decided to put a 20% tariff on wheat imports to try to address something you've probably heard about lately, the current account deficit, it means the cost of producing mie instan goes up. So the carton of Indomie ayam bawang that you normally beli untuk 70.000, ya, kira-kira Satu karton? Ya, satu karton ya. 70.000 kira-kira ya. Sekarang setelah tarif itu diterapkan, harganya 100.000. Ya, karena tarif. So increasing the cost of production by applying tariffs on wheat also means that Indonesia won't be able to make as much profit on its mie instan when it exports it to other countries. So the tariff revenue is offset by a decline in export revenue. So now you're paying an extra 30,000 for your mie instan, your Indomie ayam bawang, but the current account deficit has stayed exactly the same. The Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement will reduce tariffs on goods, improve administrative procedures for exporters and importers, and establish high-quality modern rules for services, investment and digital trade. In practice, this should reduce transaction costs for business, which means better outcomes for workers and consumers, higher wages for workers, lower prices for consumers. The agreement also includes a framework for trade and investment cooperation that will support technical assistance to strengthen commercial links and stimulate two-way investment. The next step in all of this is for both countries to ratify the agreement so that it can enter into force and businesses can start using it and the economic benefits can start to flow. So I've covered quite a lot of ground and I hope it wasn't too boring. But the key messages I want to leave you with are these. A healthy and well-educated population is essential for building a productive workforce. Openness to international markets not only helps improve health and education outcomes, it also offers opportunities to participate in global value chains that raise the overall wealth and prosperity of society. Thank you for listening.
All right, so before we continue to the question and answer sessions, I would like to try to summarize the presentation. Okay. Right, so the first presentation conducted by Professor Maria. So she discussed about the customer centricity for growth, right? So she was talking about the importance of really fulfilling or satisfying the customers, and also the importance to get the leaders, right, of the factories or the companies to actually understand and believe it. Why? Because then the company can create a culture that focuses on what the customer really needs, and a culture to actually emphasize customers' good experience. So I like the ending part is that when she was saying that when you are hired by a company that requires you to sell the company products, please start changing your mindset, right? Not just to sell, but do try your best to get chosen, right? Yes. So again, the idea of the talk is that, of course, the customer-centric companies, so the company that focuses really on customer experience, are found to be more profitable compared to ones who do not focus on the customers. Perfectly? Okay. And then the second one, the talk done by Ms. Alison Duncan. So she was actually describing several programs, yeah, that the Indonesian government collaborated with the Australian government in trying to help the nation building, all right, the development in Indonesia. And some of the programs, if I can write my own handwriting here. So it's about a program that actually alleviates stunting, in Indonesia, and then how the Australian government tried to address this poor condition in the province of NTT and Jawa Barat. So again, this is my first time actually to know that even Jawa Barat, West Java, is actually the next province, next to Jakarta. So I was very surprised to learn that even there's a stunting problem in Jawa Barat, just next to, our door. And then the other program is the water and sanitation program. Of course, all of you must probably already acknowledge this, that lack of access to clean water and sanitations actually influence or induce waterborne diseases, right? And Australia and Indonesian government have also launched the project called Water and Sanitation for Low-Income People. So I think that's a very good project to actually learn from. And then the next is about women's health. Again, Indonesia still have a very low female labor participations, and then of course it may actually induce low economic growth. So when you want to leverage a nation, so I think you have to educate the women, right? I do agree with that. Okay. All right, and last but not least, I think the aim for the talk is that we hope the students will actually realize that we do need a healthy and educated workforce in Indonesia in order to help our government to leverage our economic development, and then so that the Indonesians can actively participate in this global economy. So I think that's all right. Okay. So for the question and answer sessions, I would like to open probably about 3 questions at first. So feel free to ask questions. Bisa dalam bahasa Indonesia, dan translation. Yeah.
Hi, this question is for Professor Maria. My name is Kia, and I'm from the English Literature Department. I'm interested in how you've mentioned the changes of business styles over the decades. What do you think about the future of business? Will it change again or steady? Say about 10 years probably. Thank you.
I like this sort of questions. I always think that if I had an answer to this, I'd probably be charging you. But yes, I think it's changing, because the Milton Friedman model that businesses were just here to make money is no longer valid. And we are seeing so many different ways in which businesses are reinventing themselves that we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg. So for the next 10 years, I expect most big businesses to really try and work on socially and environmental consciousness to an extent that we haven't seen it already, or we're seeing in very, very limited ways by very, very, very limited number of corporations. So just the idea that you are actually doing something good for people, which used to belong to the public sector, and immediately divided it into the good but poor and the rich but immoral. I think that is no longer a valid model for society, and I think this is going to be changing dramatically in the next 10 years. 10 years afterwards, after that, I don't know. But I am very hopeful that by the time that I retire, which I still have some time to go, but by the time I retire, that division is no longer valid.
Okay, so any other questions?
Hello. My name is Afi from the cafe department. I've got a question for Professor Maria. So if I were to create a startup company, what is the best way for us to be customer-centric and to make our potential customers choose us without running the company into the ground? That's my question. Thank you very much.
I love working with startups, and I do this for a living, so I always coach them. And I always start by saying that when you create a startup, whatever it is, you have to start, and this is a good advantage of starting up, you start with something that is customer-centric by definition, right? Because you are building something to hopefully, challenge a frustration that exists currently. So my advice to you, if you're starting out, is never think that you have an app. I hate it when people say that my startup is an app, and I always look at them like it's like saying that your startup is a store on the street, right? What street are you on? Who's coming in? What are they coming in for, right? So by definition, focus very clearly on what are you trying to meet, what frustration with life, what pain point are you trying to cover with whatever it is that you have in mind. And then yes, you're going to be, particularly in a startup, you're going to be very challenged to make money in the beginning, but don't let that challenge really, I would say, prevent you from becoming a bit of a visionary. So stay on vision and stay on track about what pain point you're trying to solve. That would be my advice. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Professor Maria. So another question?
Excuse me, Ms. Maria. I'm James Putra, and I'm from the Japanese Minister. I want to ask you about how about the economics rate now at the present in the Union of European, and how about to preventing from the inflations, like the misconduct of the pricings and also the cost of any products, and or tariffs like the travel costs. Thank you.
I don't think I can answer this question very well because I'm not an economics expert, so I don't know where to start, but I do know that the moment that main companies are related back to corporations more from a business perspective than an economics perspective, what is very clear is that the moment you start fixing these tariffs and working with promotions, corporations are no longer working properly. And it's creating more and more untrustworthiness around each promise that they make. So people are being cheated if they engage in these sort of practices, and they're being very vocal that this should not exist, right? But now, what that impact is having at an economics, larger macro level, I'm not an expert, I'm sorry, I can't answer more properly with that. I don't know.
So maybe Alison can, no?
So I'm really sorry.
Okay, and is there still any questions? Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Theodorus and I'm from the Japanese Literature Department. I would like to ask Ms. Alison Duncan. Something caught my attention on the presentation before about Indonesia must be rich before it gets old. Well, I know that many nations, especially advanced nations, are facing a demographic shifting problems, mainly because aging population and low birth rates, especially mainly European nations and Eastern Asian. I do not know if Australia facing the same problem at the moment, but I want to know from an Australia perspective about regarding on the situation. Should there be a way to solve, to sustain the economy while the population is unsustainably unstable? Thank you.
It's a really good question. So, yeah, the whole point of that comment was that for a country that is still developing and still has a lot of people who are below the poverty line or are vulnerable to poverty, if you don't take advantage of that period when there's more people in the workforce than not, it means that if you get to a point where there's more old people who aren't working anymore, you're still trying to build all of the stuff that you need to draw people out of poverty, and there's fewer people to pay for it because the money just comes from taxpayers, right? So you need to have more taxpayers than people being assisted by the government. So countries like Japan, which is the really stark, the really stark example, I think their dependency ratio is up in the 70 percentile. It's really high. So there's not many people paying tax, and there's all these people who are dependent. But Japan managed to get to a high income level before that happened. And so they do have systems in place, even though it's really debilitating for their economy. They do have systems in place to not mean, so that doesn't mean that their economy starts to slide backwards in a really disastrous way. Australia has a similar problem. We're not at the same point as Japan, but we don't have the kind of demographic dividend that Indonesia has. Australia, one of the reasons Australia isn't in the same really difficult position as Japan and some other countries is because we have a lot of immigration. And immigrants tend to be young and have children and be around working age, and so we actually import young people. And what that means is it keeps our population young, which is really important because women aren't having as many babies as they once did, right? So we're not in the dire situation as Japan yet, but we do have an aging population. And as people live longer, but they still want to retire at age 60, that means that they're dependent for much longer. The other thing Australia has done to address this, and I know that your finance minister is considering this right now, because I talked to her 2 weeks ago about it, we have set up a retirement income policy in Australia which works really well. So it's a combination of things. There is an old age pension for people who are at the lowest levels of income. But what we've had since, for about how long now, almost 20 years now, is a compulsory system of superannuation. That's a word that we made up. It just means paying money into an old age pension, and it comes out of your gate. So everyone has to pay it, and your employer has to contribute. So what it means is that when Australians reach retirement age, the money is sitting there to pay for their retirement. They're not dependent on anybody. That's what it means in theory. What it also means is that there's all this money available for investment because someone has to manage those funds while they're sitting in the account waiting for you to retire. And that has been an unintended benefit for Australia in the time that we've had this compulsory superannuation scheme. So all of these funds that manage that money, and it's over $1 trillion in funds under management, they can be spent on infrastructure investment, they can be spent on foreign investment as well, they can be spent all over the place, and that's a really useful thing to have. So Australia is in a good position, even though we too are really worried about our ageing population. We at least have this system set up to look after people when they get old. And Indonesia needs to do the same now, because by the time you hit 2050, you need to be ready for all those old people who are going to be a drain on all the young people.
Thank you.
Thank you for the answer.
All right, so I think I would like to read, there are 2 questions from our online program. All right, so first of all is for Professor Maria. All right, so the question is that how can you actually make your company to be the chosen company as well as a profitable company? Right, so how to actually align the two interests, which is a mystery. So how to become the chosen company versus how to actually make it.
Again, if I had an answer, I would charge you for it and wouldn't get it. Okay, I can only answer in basis of what I've seen of good companies that are doing exactly that, and what they share in common. Now, the first thing that they share is that they are actually out there reinventing the way that you are releasing products and services. So they are constantly providing new ways of doing things and stepping on in the limelight. Now, when you do that, you immediately are able to charge more for any good or service, which eventually impacts your bottom line. So that, to me, would be the easiest way. If we look at something like Apple, Apple was on a normal growth pattern until they had been very challenging from the beginning about their vision, and more to the point of the second question, they knew that they had humans had a pain point, and it was challenging at the school, so they stuck to that vision. So for a long time they weren't as profitable and they weren't as growing as much. But then they introduced the iPad. First the iPod, which disrupted the market, and they reinvented a market, and then the iPad, in which they actually provoked a new category, and that took them on an upward increase. And at the moment, Apple is the most valuable brand in the world. Not only is it the most valuable brand in the world at 215,000 billion, and that is already almost 70% more than the second one in line, and they're growing at 16%, which is more than the first 24, right, with the exception of Amazon. And the way that they've done that is because from the very beginning they knew what they wanted to do at a purpose level and who they wanted to attract, and they kept challenging the market and challenging conventions to fulfill that promise, right? And when you look at the clearest competitor, which is Samsung is nowhere near that. It was until 2010, and then it just sort of flattens out. So I would argue, and again I don't know because I think nobody knows, and if they knew then they would be charging, but the only way is to understand what you need to do, connect with a why, connect with a purpose very early on, stick to that purpose, and keep reinventing every single step of the way that you interact with people and the way that you propose new things that are making individuals happy enough to pay a little bit more for it. So I would base my argument on what Apple has said.
Thank you. So the other question is targeted to Alison. Okay, so what is the first main thing that the Indonesian government has to do in order to complete the big homework for this country? That's the question.
You know the answer, you can share it first.
That's really hard.
Okay.
Who asked that? I mean, the fact is, the first thing I'll say is, I nor my country have all the answers. I mean, this is the 4th largest country in the world and the 3rd largest democracy, and that is not an easy thing to run. And, you know, there is no one out there who has sorted all of this out and somehow Indonesia's just getting it wrong. I mean, it is a really big challenge to run this country. So that's the first point. The extent to which Australia helps is where we have the ability to help you with things that we have learnt about by getting things wrong ourselves in the past. And so we do have things to share with Indonesia about the things we've learnt on the way. And I think, you know, some of the most important things I think I mentioned in my speech. I was having a conversation with your former Vice President the other day, Pak Budiono, And he was saying that there are three things he thinks when he looks at the neighbouring Asian countries that have really succeeded in the last 50 years. Three things that he thinks are absolutely critical. The first one is education. We've already talked about that. If you don't have a well-educated society, you're not going to have a well-functioning country. The second thing he said was good institutions. So good, responsible, clean government and good institutions within your society, so LSM and other kind of civil society organisations. And the third thing he said, and I guess he's an economist, so he would say this, was infrastructure. Because if you can't move stuff around, and if you don't, I mean, infrastructure includes water and sanitation, all of those things. If you can't move stuff around on roads, people and goods, if you can't have clean water and get rid of the poo, you know, if you don't have good infrastructure, then you can't run a country very well. So in his view, and he's a much smarter man than me, education, good institutions and infrastructure, and I think if you could achieve those three things, you'd be doing pretty well in any country.
Okay, so thank you so much for all of the insights and answers. So again, before I return the mic to our MC, so guys, I hope you can actually take the benefit of these presentations by our distinguished speakers. And I hope you can, you know, sort of have a broadened mind. And I know that most of you are from the literature department. So I think it is actually by design. Yeah. So I think the way our university actually set up the talk is that so that students not from the business school can actually learn something, you know, like sort of outside that expertise. Yeah.
I'm super proud that you are reading literature. My son is your age, and he's going to university next year, and he was thinking about reading comparative literature. He's now going to be reading philosophy, and I think this is the future. And to the question about how are you going to manage business in the future with critical thinkers, because all this idea that you have to read business administration to be practical in this world is going to kill us all. so thank you for reading literature, and thank you for contributing to critical thinking.